fundraiser?
1993. World Trade Center bombing, remember? During the trial, one of the bombers claimed the CIA had advanced knowledge. The diplomat who issued the terrorist visa was CIA. It's not unthinkable they paved the way for the bombing purely to justify a budget increase.
You're telling me that you're gonna fake some terrorist thing just to scare some money out of Congress?
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Hennessy, I've no idea how to fake killing 4,000 people. So we're just gonna have to do it for real. Oh, blame it on the Muslims, naturally. Then I get my funding. Good night, old girl. Timothy, I'll be in Chopper 1.
Larry Silverstein purchases the lease to the World Trade Center 7 weeks before 9/11, despite the major problems it had with asbestos. The buildings happen to completely collapse, even without a plane hitting one of them. Then he collects $4.5 billion from insurance companies.
I was getting this question in the 1990s, and I said that the West really doesn't understand militant Islam. So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
Minister Ehud Barak, who's in London at the moment. Mr. Barak, welcome to BBC World. First, your reaction, having heard what's happened. At least 4 planes have been hijacked, and there may be more.
The world will not be the same from today on. I don't know who is responsible. I believe we will know in 12 hours. Bin Laden sits in Afghanistan. There is a source of
who else
terror.
Can you identify, though? Because we're not saying he's responsible for this necessarily.
No, we don't say that he's responsible. Every simple step, crossing borders or going on a plane or on a ship, will become more complicated. It's a time to launch a operational, concrete war against terror, even if it takes certain pains from the routine activities of our normal society. This is the time to deploy a globally concerted effort led by the United States, the UK, Europe, and Russia against all sources of terror. Consistently, along 6 or 10 years, Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea. This is the only way. Without this clarity of purpose, there will be no world order, no world order possible.
The peddling of lies that 9/11 was somehow a Jewish plot, or that the 7/7 London attacks were staged. The idea that Muslims are persecuted all over the world as a deliberate act of Western policy. The concept of an inevitable clash of civilizations.
A new governor was just elected. Elliot Spitzer, an old friend who I knew well. I said, Elliot, if you don't help me, I'll never collect from the insurance companies. And guess what? He listened and he said, you know what? You're entitled. I'm going to get you the money. And in 6 months, he got me the $4.5 billion. The insurance companies didn't like me, but at least I got the money.
A great deal of question about whether or not the damage and the ultimate destruction of the buildings was caused by the airplanes, by architectural defect, or possibly by bombs or aftershocks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because that's your foundation. And it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid and half of the columns were blown out. I mean, so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows, you had the steel on the outside. So you had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows in the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. and in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747, or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly, because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
نؤكد على حقيقة الصراع بيننا وبين أمريكا، وهو في غاية الأهمية والخطورة ليس للمسلمين فقط بل للعالم أجمع. فما تتهم به أمريكا هذه الفئة المهاجرة المجاهدة في سبيل الله لا يقوم عليه دليل، وإنما هو البغي والظلم والعدوان. فتاريخ المجاهدين العرب بفضل الله سبحانه وتعالى واضح بين أبيض ناصع، فقد خرج هؤلاء منذ 20 سنة عندما ظهر الإرهاب المذموم الحقيقي على أيدي الاتحاد السوفيتي ضد هؤلاء الأطفال وضد الأبرياء في أفغانستان. فالذين خرجوا لنصرة المستضعفين لا يعقل اليوم أن يذهبوا لقتل الأبرياء كما يزعم الزاعمون.
The building is going to contain not 2 million feet, but 1.7 million. And that's one of the sacrifices we have to make. I said, let's make it and let's get on with it. And so, next thing you know, we've got the designs of a building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002.
A Jewish billionaire, he also planned a new design in 2000 while the towers were still standing.
Stranger still, lucky Larry Silverstein cheated death on 9/11 when he skipped out on a routine business meeting that took place every morning in Windows on the World restaurant at the top of the North Tower.
I understand you had daily breakfast meetings with people, I think, in the Windows of the World, the famous restaurant.
That's correct. That's correct.
But you weren't there for breakfast on the day of September 11th. Why was that?
That morning, my wife had made an appointment for me at the dermatologist, who I have to visit with regularity, right? And as I'm dressing to go to the dermatologist that morning, I looked at my wife and said, you know, I've got so much to do downtown. Cancel the dermatologist. I've got to go downtown. She got upset. She said, you can't cancel. You've got to go.
Was that Larry Silverstein's luck?
It was clearly my luck. It was clearly my luck. It was clearly my luck.
And the truth of the matter is, Clara and I led hundreds of missions to Israel. We were here so many times. Every chance we could get to come back, we took it because it gave us such intense pleasure. And we knew we were doing a lot of good for the country. I had the pleasure of working pretty much with every prime minister of Israel from Yitzhak Shamir forward.
Was effectively a charter of the Project for a New American Century, a neoconservative think tank in Washington.
The founding members included Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz of the Defense Department, Richard Pearl, head of the Defense Advisory Board, Louis Libby, Cheney's chief of staff, John Bolton, Undersecretary of State for Arms Control, Elliot Cohen, who's on the Defense Policy Board.
Much of what these men wanted is coming true. They urged that the U.S. abandon the anti-ballistic missile treaty. It has. They wanted establishment of more permanent U.S. military bases abroad. That is happening in the Philippines and in Georgia and will likely happen in Iraq. They urged regime change as a goal of foreign wars, not just in Iraq. They wanted the U.S. as a global constabulary, their word, unburdened by the UN or world opinion, preventing any challenge to U.S. dominance. But, they wrote, a year before September 11th, such aspirations are unlikely to be realized without a catastrophic and catalyzing event